Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Emotional Man Weekly Podcast. Today, I am really excited to have Simon Fallows here with us. He is the president and chief coach and consultant for Freedom for Founders, where he helps business owners go through the whole process, whether it's a startup or a scale up or multi-generational stages for the operation. He gets and helps them get ready for the sale. So, Simon, thank you so much for coming on. If you wouldn't mind just giving us the story of where you got the idea for Freedom for Founders and where you're currently at with the business.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, where did I get the idea from? I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've owned and operated multiple businesses of my own. And I'm 35 years old. I was burnt out. I was running multiple companies and had 30,000 square foot plants with 60 employees. We were on the front end wave of all the flat screens, right? Plasmas and LCDs. We're installing and integrating them in installations all over North America. And so it was a busy time. And I was honestly burnt out trying to keep a hold of it all. And I made the strategic move to bring in a consultant. And within 8 months, I made him CEO of my organization. And it was the best decision I ever made. He became a business partner. And he really helped me understand this idea that I needed to make myself replaceable. If I was ever going to transition the business or ever sell the business, I had to get out of my own way and let others lead. And that led to his eventual leadership, right? i.e. CEO of the organization. That was how really it all started. And I've been on a path since 2008 to help other owners achieve what I did. And that was successfully exit that business, certainly, but then help other owners do the same.
So what do you find is the biggest problem that you had in that transition? And what are the things that business owners just really have a hard time adjusting the way they think about their business?
Yeah, it's really about owner dependency, right? There's too much dependency in the context of that owner and their ownership of that organization. And what I mean by that is that dependency equals control. And most business owners think that they need to control everything. And certainly 95% of all businesses in North America are under 1 million in value. We're all small enterprises trying to make it over that hump, right? The very few have done it because there's too much control. And that control equals letting go of our personal responsibilities, right? Of the relationships we have within the company. Hey, we go golfing with the senior sales staff, right? Or the sales manager. Maybe we should rethink that, right? If we want to professionalize the business. So that's some of my number one pieces of advice. It's helping owners understand that too much owner dependency or too much control is actually detrimental to their business, and it doesn't make it transitionable. And then they end up in a situation, and we call it a triggering event. It could be a health concern, a divorce, unfortunately, like I went through. And I've got a personal story I can share there. Or health, we call it disease, divorce, distress with a business owner, or outside distress like the pandemic creates issues in the business where if we're not prepared, then there's very little money that could ever be extracted. And most businesses end up having to liquidate.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you mentioned you had a story here. One of the big issues that I have found with both my clients and just business owners in general is we don't realize we're in the burnout quagmire until we're drowning. You could share your experience with realizing you had entered the quagmire, and how did you get out? What were the warning signs?
Warning signs. I worked 60, 70, 80 hours a week. And I did that for the better part of 5-6 years. And then I got the operation in place. But then when we hit some new strides in the marketplace in 2006, 7, 8, right before the collapse, I was doing a pivot in the business. I was moving from flat panels into healthcare, like a full workstation on the wall. And in that transition, I was back to, again, where I'd gone back to reasonable hours. Now it was doubling down again at 60, 70, 80 hours a week, but it was really unhealthy and it was impacting my marriage. It's what created some of the fracturing in my marriage. And eventually I think is in part what led to the separation that I went through. But, and the reason why I was open-minded to consulting and then this consultant positioning it as CEO of the organization was all in relationship to this burnout. And the burnout was real. It was doing too many things, too much focus on too many areas within the context of the business. And then we tried to pivot and do something different. It was overwhelming.
No, I want to dig into this. One of the common problems in any business is the owner-agent dilemma.
Right.
Where the agent, such as the CEO or the people you put in charge, don't necessarily their interests don't align with the interests of the owner. That is one of the main causes of concern for owners who have a
Yeah.
hard time letting go. Can they trust these people
Right.
to operate this the way that they would want operated, or to care for it like they would since it's their baby? What helped you overcome that? Or how did you manage that relationship so you could enjoy freedom?
You nailed it. Let's go back to the story, right? It's back to this. Brad Chitty was his name. He was my business partner that I made CEO. But if you back up with in relationship to what happened, I became real honest with him, maybe for the first time, right? With another individual, another man in this case, that I explained my situation with the business and my desire to stop being attractive to everybody in the market, right? We kept manufacturing solutions for a marketplace that was literally exploding, right? And it just created a bird nest of activity. And I needed somebody to help me professionalize the business and settle into something. And I wanted to do this project, right? Move into healthcare. And so it started with a conversation, being open and honest about my business situation and my personal situation and what my real goals and objectives were. And then it created it in me an ability that where I had to start handing off, right? I had to start letting go of the engineering and the sales and the marketing and all the departments I was trying to run, right? And effectively, we took one day a week, Brad and I, and we started strategic planning, right? So it was a few hours to Thursdays. And then we bought a boat and we did the strategic planning on a boat. Right? We went golfing, but we interjected play with, right, this real hard pivot. And when it came to it, we let 8 people go in one day, right? And 4 more followed a couple of weeks later. Like it was a very strategic, and within a week, we had all the replacements. We hired 15 to replace, right? So answering your question, right? It was very deliberate, very intentional, really hard. And it took a lot of communication with, in this case, who became a business partner, a confidant, to make sure that we could, hey, we had the right people, man. They were on the bus and they were doing the right things, but we needed to change. I needed to change or I was going to physically implode. And with that came that decision to rescope and take the management team and rescope it. And then that's when Brad became CEO. Once he had really put the team in place, and I let him take it over, and I could focus on what I love to do. And I still had majority share of the company, and it was a great position to be in. Yeah.
So what would you say was the main, if you had to narrow it down to the biggest problem, what do you think it was?
The biggest
Problem that you had to overcome in letting go of the company, letting go and delegating.
Oh my God. Yeah. It sent me into counseling, honestly. The people, I had so much fun. Like I was the owner that got his car wrapped in cellophane, right? I was the one that bought a blow up doll. And because I thought that would be fun to put in somebody's office, and who went on an extended vacation. And then that blow up doll ended up like in various positions around the plant, and forklift driver would back up on a string coming off the racking. We just had so much fun. It was a great culture, and it was an intense time. But it led to a lack of professionalization, honestly, that when we wanted to patent product, move into healthcare, do something really specific with the goal of 10xing the business, and me working smarter, not harder. I still worked hard, but I worked out of the office. I traveled. I was in Boston to San Francisco, right? In hospitals, developing products in the field where they needed it to be developed. And I could only do that when I was able to release myself from the organization. And boy, man, did I ever thrive, and both personally, professionally.
Let's transition a little. We understand the kind of the company and kind of that hit moment you experienced at Genesis for Freedom for Founders and why this was so important to you. Let's talk a little bit about on the family side. Now, as I understand, you have 3 children. What are their ages and names?
We got Madison, Dawson, and Brooklyn. And now we had three children in 3 years. So this added to that break point, right? They were, the last one was born in 2005. They're now 17, 19, and 20. The youngest is catching up fast here. She turns 18 in a month.
And okay, so you have these 3 kids. Now, during this tough time, how old were they? Were they in like the tween years? Was that
during the challenge?
So during this period of the great pivot?
Yeah, no, young. They were like 3, 4, 5.
Oh, wow. So that
So
there's still up all day. That's a tough time.
2007, yeah, 2-year-old, 2.5-year-old. Yeah, like we were, yeah. Part of the reason for the pivot, right, was to, because hey, when I invest in, including my kids, I was the all-in dad, man. I talking about taking business trips, trade shows, they'd be coming with me. Even if my wife didn't, I'd put them in the car. We'd drive over flying. I'd fly. I heavily involved myself both personally and professionally, and I was burning out. I was playing hide and seek purposely so I could hide and sleep.
We've all done it. We've all done it.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it was an impetus for change, right? And I wanted, as the kids became more aware, and now there were 3 and 4 and 5, I just thought, man, this is the time I get to be the best dad and really drive into them the values and the things that I missed, right? I had an absentee dad when my mom and my dad worked like I did. And yet I said, man, I don't want to make that mistake. I got caught in both worlds. But I think I did a really good job at bringing them up and spending that time. I sold the company for them in 2012. I was 39 years old. And that was a big part of the decision. It was for my marriage and certainly for my kids.
You talk a little bit about that. Selling the company
Mhm.
and moving on can be scary,
Oh, yeah.
especially if you have a golden goose that's going well.
Yeah.
So talk me through the process. Why did you choose to sell the company, and how did that factor in with trying to maintain family relationships?
Yeah, the choice to sell the company again was just a good strategic advice. We were looking for money to grow. The healthcare division we fully pivoted and we were getting specified in hospitals all over North America. Our patent was in place. And so we were looking for money to grow. And I had a business broker approach me. He said, you should have a broker on your team. And I said, sure, why not? And the strategic advice he gave me was instrumental. It's why I have Freedom for Founders today. It's owners think that they're gonna prepare their business or not prepare it, and or be in at some point it's just gonna sell, and in 6 months they're gonna be offered to freedom. And I said, no, there's dozens of ways a company can sell or transition. And I chose a very strategic way to do it, and through great advice. And so we had positioned the business for investment, but it was who we put it in front of. We put it in front of some of our largest customers, and knowing that if they lost the opportunity, right, through an acquisition or an investment, that would put them outside of the product that we had gotten specified in so many hospitals. So that created disruption where it really forced a decision. And in time, it didn't take long. We found a third-party manufacturer, bottom line, that was supplying to all those businesses. So the sale for me was strategic in that we got 10 times the value of the business. So, right, I'd have to spend another 5+ years growing the business, but I got to come on board as a strategic acquisition. My goal was to remain in place for 5 years and grow the overall division within a $300 million business. It was really exciting. And I didn't have to worry about the paint line and the people and the production, ISO certification. It was turnkey. Great strategic exit. And what I didn't see coming was the whole business uprooted itself and got sold and moved to Grand Rapids. You can never predict everything, but that's how it unfolded. It was very strategic. I wouldn't have sold, right, to anybody. It was not an exit strategy per se. It was more of a transition so that we could grow and use other people's money and their plant, their facility, their QC teams, right? QC was brutal in healthcare. So it was very strategic. And they insisted, part of their culture, that you work 40 hours a week if you're an executive. And so it met my goals there as well. And I got to grow the business within a business and still meet my family goals, which were to spend more time with them and be able to travel.
A week to run a company,
Right.
especially if you're trying to start up or scale it up. Well, how would you respond to that? Do you think it's possible to work less than 50 hours a week and
Oh,
starting
yeah.
up a company or growing a company and to do it relatively quickly?
Well, the startup phase is always hard, right? And I've been in it countless times. It's always difficult. And if you're growing organically, you're self-funding it, right? And you're short for cash personally, right? If you can't pay the mortgage, depending on your business, then yeah, individuals get caught into the 50, 60-hour weeks because they're just wearing so many hats. But that's got to come to a pretty quick conclusion. You got to get the business into a place that you can commercialize and you can really understand the value that that you're bringing and the value you're extracting. And most business owners don't understand that, right? They jump into all kinds of opportunities there where they shouldn't, right? Before realizing what it's going to take to actually monetize and pay themselves first, right? A reasonable income, but more importantly, pay somebody else. And that today that could be subcontracting to India or right around the world in subcontract employment to I got a co-op student here. I'll always have a co-op student in my office and to be strategic, but you got to get people in place so that you can work less and start working on the business to the point where I think to answer your question, I don't want you to spend any time in your business. If you're 50 plus, I prefer you be in Arizona and the business is running better than without you. That's ultimately the goal. Richard Branson has hundreds of companies. You can't manage that many companies without great leadership. And that should be the goal. That's freedom for founders, is the freedom to be able to choose what you want to do next and not necessarily sell the company, right? Bring in an integrator, a 25% partner like I did, right? Put in an ESOP, which is an employee stock ownership plan, right? And there's so many iterations of that where you can just give off and hand off leadership so other people can run the organization. I tell you, the faster you can do that, the more successful you'll be.
What did that do for your family? So once you were able to free yourself from the company, you sold it, you have this kind of 5-year transition period.
Yeah.
What was your life like before with your family? What were some of the friction points you were experiencing, and how did it affect those friction points after you went through this process?
My kids love being with me, right? So time is the big factor, and they wanted just more and more time with me. And they were at that age now where just throwing them all on an airplane, like they're in school, they're fully involved, they got friends, but they still wanted my time. And I was again that dad, right or wrong. Some said you spent too much time, but I did. I was on the street. I was their friend's best friend, and but that took a toll on me personally as well. And started to chip away at my marriage because I was spending more time with them than I was with my spouse because she had other interests. Like right? She liked to do, right. And we didn't spend as much time together because I invested so much into my children and sports, right? Hockey, dance. Oh my gosh. Two girls in dance and one in hockey.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so we're dividing and conquering. My wife going one way and I'm going the other way. And right. And now this is post sale, right? One of the reasons it was going on inside the sale. Thankfully, with some good grandparents who were helping and all of that. But as of 2011, August, when I sold the business and then got transitioned into 40-hour weeks and could take time off, I was an executive now.
Right.
It worked. And then 2013, when the business moved into Grand Rapids, I worked for a not-for-profit and I drove truck. I drove a cube van. And I set my own hours and everything pivoted, really started to change. And I was glad not to have to move and I was satisfied, right? With the business, the valuation, the whole process. My product still lives on today. It's been sold 2 or 3 other times with businesses, but it's still a patented it's really viable product. One of the best in the world for bedside administration, computerization in hospitals. I'm really proud of it. I'm proud more of the fact that I've raised great kids. And yeah.
Now, one of the challenges business owners have is learning when to balance, say, the needs of their clients and their business and the needs of their spouse and children. Can you think of a time, a specific, maybe an example of when you had to make a choice between the two, and when did you decide to spend time with children or your spouse, or when did you decide to spend the time meeting clients' need and why?
Yeah. For me, that was a weekly, sometimes daily call. Like in the heyday of phone, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That time, man, that was a conscious choice. Again, thankfully, we had some family, right? Grandparents that really were supportive. And we ended up moving them in the basement of our house. We needed help, right? Like 3 kids under 3 years. And then when they grew up, they were all in sport. They were all together. So it's conscious decisions. Did I make some poor ones? Yeah. But I tried to always pick the family and the kids first. Tried really hard to do that. I tried to block out times of my schedule and not answer calls in the evenings. I learned along the way, probably 2004 to be more specific, 4 to 7, where I really dialed in and cell phones. I don't know. It's called technology revolution. I grew through it, right? The
Yeah.
business grew it from the BlackBerry to the Apple. But just controlling and monitoring, my time became super important. And again, another reason why I said, look, we're going to switch this business model around, right? I can't be on call for a rollout at Walmart or pick a retailer. And now I got calls from installers at 11 o'clock at night or 5. I'm just a small piece in the whole wheel, but nothing happens without what we do, right? We can't install or integrate without our little piece. So I had to take that factor away.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question. Part of your job or part of what you help business owners do is evaluate their companies.
That's right.
And it's very easy to determine whether or not you're off and on track in a business, in a company. You have KPIs. You can take any metric you want. You can use it to measure the success of your company. Now, if someone asked you for 4 or 5 KPIs for a family's health or success, how would you respond to that question? What would you assess are the KPIs for your family? That if these things are down, like we're not doing well, but if these things are happening, we're usually pretty okay. Well, what would you say those are?
Yeah. Oh my God. Well, your relationship with your spouse, right? And it 2018, it went sideways for me. And there's a long story in relationship to some family dynamics and what happened there. But yeah, it's really, you got to be tight with your spouse, man. You got to be like over communicating. And we weren't good at it when we'd gone to some counseling, but we preferred to avoid conflict. And we dealt with issues, right? Type A personalities as they came. And I said, we were really good parents, but we really, as it turned out, grew apart. And even when I sold the company, you'd think, wow, you know what? I did have opportunities, but that fracturing had taken place when so much had happened. And then we had this free time and free cash flow and some family dynamics and issues that I won't get into here, but that rift had started and there was walls put up. Indifference, best described, right? As indifference. Right. And left too long, we lost track in relationship to where to even start. And unfortunately, by 2018, it was for her, it was just easier to move on to somebody else. And for me, it devastated me. But I've come to realize why and what my part was in that. Communicate. I'm getting the answer here. Communication, right? Removing these walls of indifference and partnering with your spouse is number one because you can't get that right. It's really hard to get it right with the kids. I did it by pure force and energy, and I was very motivated to do something differently than my parents did with me and in my upbringing, but it wasn't always healthy for me. Talk about choosing customers versus my kids. Then is the decision to choose myself over my kids, and I sacrificed myself. A lot of friendships. I sacrificed a lot of volunteering opportunities, other opportunities to make an impact or a difference after I had that big win. And look, I was doing some good things with one particular company, but I certainly could have done more and had a greater impact or investment. Yeah.
So communication, you've outlined communication as a kind of key metric. How would you measure whether or not you're communicating enough with your spouse, with your kids? Tell you what, if you had to go back 15 years ago and give advice to yourself, say, Simon, you need to be measuring these things to make sure you're on track.
Yeah.
What advice would you give him?
Yeah. It seems so cliche, but it was so simple. And it's still simple today. It's like you would date your spouse. You would meet once a week or at least once a week. Right. But then it comes down to meaningful conversation, right? That you would, and have the same with the kids. And I started to do that, right? One-on-ones. You just got to one-on-one. You got to spend time. And then ask questions like KPI on a scale of 1 to 10. How are we really doing? I didn't ask those questions. Looking back now, it would be being definitely more intentional, right? I had so much fear, so much in my head going on up here that I just let manifest and continue to spiral and that needed answers. And I could only get those answers if I reached out, one, to my spouse or to some other safe people, other men specifically that I could trust. And Brad was there for sure as a business partner. But I lost my way in relationship to other key men that I could relate to personally that might have helped certainly in my marriage situation as things became really tough in that whole family dynamic.
I just want to thank you. You've been willing to dive into some kind of the most challenging parts of your life and offering these kind of nuggets of wisdom. We all have scars. Thank you so much for sharing them with us. Most of our audience are business owners or spouses, or they know business owners or business leaders themselves or professionals. What advice would you give them in terms of this is three things I've learned from balancing my work life?
Your work is your life. For most entrepreneurs, they are so intertwined. Okay. And in there is the kids and the marriage, but the workplace is right in there. It's our baby for most owners, right? This is our baby. And it's some value it more than our kids, honestly, and our spouse. Or if we're going to be honest, we put more value on our businesses and on what we built and how we're trying to manage and control it than we do on any other relationship. And that's the danger, because eventually you're going to exit the business, whether you want to or not. Eventually, like that communication with your spouse or somebody else, you've got to communicate. You take this personal business, this entity, it's an entity, and you've got to be able to bring it to somebody else. You've got to be able to communicate. Far too often consultants come in or we talk about goals and objectives, company, right? Corporate. What's your vision and mission and strategy? Very few people come at it and say, look, what was your personal idea? Did you really sign up to work 50, 60 hours a week at 50 years old? Is this really what freedom is? Your wife wants to travel. Your husband, your significant other wants to explore, wants to do new things, but you don't. I said, entrepreneurs weren't designed to do the same thing over and over again. We're entrepreneurial. We shouldn't, 10 years, that's a lifetime for an entrepreneur. And yet some owners have been doing it for 20, 30 years. I get it. You don't know how to let go, but the communication has to start. And I say, start it with somebody. And unfortunately, what I've learned is our key advisors aren't initiating conversation. Our accountants, our lawyer, if we have a lawyer, or if we ever talk to them, but we should, honestly, we should. They've got great advice they can give. We got wealth planners. We've got others in our circle of influence that know our business, perhaps, that we should be talking to. But we have to initiate the conversation as owners, because I'm finding that it's not happening from advisors. Advisors are transactional. They're looking in the rearview mirror. Who's looking out ahead of the game, right? In front, and saying, look, what is your real objective now, right? Because retirement doesn't have to be selling and just closing the doors, right? Sometimes it's a family transition, but look, honestly, does your son or daughter want to take over the business? We have to be honest with ourselves. And that just, honestly, it's hard, but it takes communication. It takes, right, with a trusted individual. Join a mentorship group. There's online forums all over Facebook and LinkedIn and business groups. If you don't want to do something one-on-one, then find a group you can join and start asking questions. Block out some time and really discover what it is you intended to do. Because we had a plan in our 20s, but now we get to our 40s and our 50s, 60s, 70s, and we've lost sight of it. Everything becomes routine. But this is my perspective, what I'm seeing. And most owners then find themselves trapped and without a strategy or a plan. And in 5 years, I'll get to that. In 5 years, I'll retire. No, you won't. Unless there's a triggering event, you won't take it seriously enough. And if 80% of your money or more is locked up in your business, you're not going to extract it if you're not making it transitionable. And that takes 2 to 5 years to do. So some would say, I'm going to wait 5 years. And then 5 years comes, I tell them, you got another 5 because now the work starts to make sure the business is transitionable and you get the value out of the business, because your business probably isn't worth $3 million. It's probably only worth $1 million or $750,000, right? Because you haven't made it transitionable. You haven't looked at it from a buyer's perspective. You've been treating it like a personal bank account. There's 30 or 40 different reasons, right? Why businesses just don't transition. Too much customer concentration. I can go down this road now, right? Business owners have no idea what their options. Really, what I'm here to do is help. And if you follow my LinkedIn profile or my YouTube channel, you're going to see dozens of videos there where I call it a rant.
So for those who are listening, what is your YouTube channel and where can they find you on LinkedIn?
You just look up Freedom for Founders, honestly. And you're going to find the LinkedIn connection there, Simon Fallows. You're going to find pretty easy then the link tree on Instagram. that's going to take you to all my profiles, right? So a little bit of investigation, you'll find me. Not many Simons, certainly not any that I know of in North America.
Thank you, Simon, for sharing your wisdom with us. I really benefited from this. This is fantastic. As a business owner, as a family man, thank you so much for sharing everything that you've learned over the years. And I really hope that anyone who's listening, who's looking for more freedom, looking for more balance in their life, come check out Simon. See what your options are as a business owner. So eventually you have that exit strategy and you know how to transition out of the company so that you can enjoy the rest of your life. Thank you, Simon. This has been a pleasure.
Thanks, Joseph.